The Newsround on Off the Ball.
With Gillette. Put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
This is News Talk.
Hello and welcome to Off the Ball. I'm Kathleen McNamee and we have a great show lined up for you this evening to fill the empty space that is the time between Christmas and New Year. Being the Sligo woman that I am, we have a bit of a Sligo takeover planned for our news round this evening, where I'll be joined by Cathal Mullaney and Arthur James O'Dea. From 7:30, former Ireland and Munster rugby player Fiona Hayes will be on for Wednesday Night Rugby as we discuss yet more cancellations for the Irish provinces and preview Connacht versus Munster. From 8 p.m, we will be hearing from Rachel Blackmore on her incredible year and Brian O'Driscoll discussing Ireland's incredible win over New Zealand. To round the show off, Joe Malloy will be chatting to Paul McShane about Manchester United and Gabrielle McCarthy about Italy's Euro 2020 win. If you want to get in touch, you can text in at 53106 or you can tweet us at Off the Ball on Twitter. Cathal, it's great to have you here.
And you too, Kathleen. How are you?
I'm very much excited about the fact that we get to have this Sligo takeover tonight. It's not something that I think has ever really been done on Off the Ball for.
Yeah,
which
I wonder where it ranks in terms of Sligo sporting achievements. A clean sweep on Off the Ball. What do you think?
Probably high enough, in fairness. I don't think, well, I suppose you could say with Mother McSharry and stuff this year.
We've had a good year.
We've had a good year, so it hasn't been too bad. And joining us on the line, we also have Arthur. Arthur, how are you?
Not so bad, Kathleen. How are you?
I'm good. Well, I suppose I'm actually a bit in the middle of, I don't know where I am, because obviously we're in that weird time. It's Christmas one moment and then we're waiting for New Year to hit. What have you guys been getting up to the last couple of days to entertain yourselves, considering the fact that the sporting schedule is a bit all over the place?
Yeah, I guess the football to a certain extent has continued, and Liverpool and Leicester was entertaining in certain ways last night. Great win for Leicester. You have to say they really stuck at it and got the result they deserved. Liverpool had the chances, but you feel that's just a significant result in terms of the Premier League title race, because Chelsea and Liverpool now coming up at the weekend. Liverpool really under pressure now to make sure that they don't slip up again, and Man City obviously in brilliant form to play again tonight to really cement their place at the top of the table. And I know we're only at Christmas, but there's almost an ominous feel to the Premier League title race at the moment, unfortunately from a neutral observer's point of view. And of course the darts is continuing as well. Kathleen, I guess it's synonymous with Christmas now at this stage, isn't it, the darts? I think a lot of people have bought into it now. The COVID situation has really impacted it, and Michael van Gerwen having to pull out was a huge blow to the tournament. Dave Chisnell had to pull out today as well because he tested positive for COVID, and actually Gerwyn Price, we'll get into it in the news round in a little bit, but Gerwyn Price has called for the tournament itself to be postponed, so I'm not quite sure if it'll go that far, but it still has provided some pretty decent entertainment over the Christmas.
I don't know how many people have texted me over the last few days saying that they haven't been able to get out of the house because they've tested positive for COVID or something, and suddenly have become very interested in darts. I feel like it's a similar effect we had with Rachel Blackmore in the horse racing. All of a sudden people are kind of getting interested in sports they might not necessarily always pay attention to because there is literally nothing else to do.
Yeah, and Leopardstown has been great as well. You mentioned the racing, and Rachel Blackmore had another winner today. It's been very entertaining. It wrapped up today as well, so we haven't been badly served at all this Christmas in terms of sport, considering the COVID situation obviously, which is quite bleak at the moment, and particularly with the case numbers that have been released in the last half an hour or so. But thankfully the sport continues to a certain extent, and the Leinster and Ulster match obviously called off in the last couple of hours as well on New Year's Day is a disappointment, but hopefully the new year will bring a more structured sporting environment, shall we say, and less cancellations and more sport.
Yeah, we'll be hoping as three Connacht people that the game goes ahead. Well, at least I'll say right now we'll be hoping that the game goes ahead. Will depend on what actual result we get. What about you, Arthur? What has been the thing that's kind of caught your eye over Christmas that you've really enjoyed in the sporting world?
Well, to be honest with you, bringing it right back down to Sligo again. Finally got a hands on the game of our life. One of our studio members there, written from a Sligo GA point of view, which filled the gap quite nicely. Other than that, it's kind of watching the football just night and night, whatever game kind of gets the go ahead. But I mean, you look at the case numbers again today here, case numbers in the UK, and it's kind of it just feels like it's kind of, with the one league, with the Premier League, it feels like it's almost petered out in terms of a competitive thing. If City get up ahead of steam, which they look to be doing, and then you're kind of well, how much longer is it going to carry on like it is? It's just struggling not to feel kind of ominous about the whole thing.
Yeah, definitely. I was trying to remember today, I was on Team 33 at the start of the season, and I was trying to remember if I tipped Chelsea or City to win the league, and I'm really hoping at this stage that I did say City, because it does look like that they're trying to race ahead. I suppose we will straight into our news round. The news round is brought to you with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors.
Yeah, Kathleen, we'll start with that rugby news that broke inside the last couple of hours, and that's the United Rugby Championship match between Ulster and Leinster. It's been postponed. Their derby was due to take place at the Kingspan Stadium on Saturday. Now, the organisers have taken the decision to postpone the match due to further positive COVID cases in the Ulster squad, and they do say that the game will be rescheduled. It means a continuation of the broken schedule for the provinces. Leinster's last 3 matches now have been called off. Their meeting with Munster, of course, on St Stephen's Day fell by the wayside, as did their Heineken Champions Cup clash with Montpellier, and Ulster's St Stephen's Day clash against Connacht was also called off. 2 other games too have fallen this weekend in the URC. The Dragons meeting with Cardiff and Edinburgh versus Glasgow will also be rescheduled. Connacht's match against Munster does go ahead as things stand, and that's scheduled for the Sports Ground in Galway on Saturday at 5:15. And in some Connacht news today, Abraham Papali is set to move to Brive at the end of the season. The versatile back row will join the French outfit on a 2-year deal. His Connacht teammate Sammy Arnold is also moving to Brive next season.
I suppose the loss of Papi is kind of a big one. I think he's a bit of a cult favourite down in Connacht, just for the big hits he's put in, but he's also been a bit dangerous in the sense that he's had quite a few red cards. Is the sort of player, do you think, that Connacht are going to miss next year?
Yeah, I think so, and that's a couple of players now. Sammy Arnold and Ultan Dillane obviously is heading for France as well, so I guess the squad is breaking up a little bit, but lots of positives for Connacht so far in this campaign. I think they've really played a really attractive brand of rugby, and in terms of getting the results, maybe not quite as often as Andy Friend might like in terms of getting over the line and winning matches, but the brand of rugby that they're playing, I think, has endeared them to a lot of supporters and neutrals. And reading a piece today that Connacht tend to be everybody's second province outside of Connacht because of the way that they play. So lots of positives. I think the crowd aspect as well obviously will impact on the sports ground as well, because it's such a difficult place to go for teams, particularly at a European level. If the weather is quite poor as well, it can be difficult for some of the teams to come there, and Connacht really do make it a fortress. So the fact that the crowds will be reduced going forward isn't brilliant from a Connacht point of view, or indeed a rugby point of view in general. But yeah, I think lots of positives, Kathleen, for Connacht, and we have a good Sligo influence with the province as well, and rugby has taken off, I think, in the West in recent years.
It really has. Like, I know in Sligo, the rugby club has always been massive. It's been a massive part of the county, especially, I think, I live quite outside the town, and the town's obviously a soccer stronghold more so than it is any other sport. But I've always enjoyed going over to the rugby club, and it's produced some nice talent.
Yeah, and they've gone towards Connacht as well. The likes of Stephen Cairns and stuff in recent years has gone and played for Connacht. And you mentioned Sligo Rugby Club have made huge progress in recent years, and Ballina, I know, not too far away as well, have made big progress. So the game is definitely growing, and I think Connacht really have put in place the fact that it's all 5 counties together and it's all the west of Ireland together, rather than just being a Galway based sport where the sports ground obviously is. And I think a lot of people in the west have really bought into that, and although they mightn't be as well resourced as some of the other teams in Europe, they certainly are well able to punch at their weight and above their weight. And I think if Andy Friend can stay around and they continue to develop the brand of rugby that they're playing at the moment, I think definitely bright things lie down in front for Connacht in the coming years, we hope.
Arthur, would you say that Connacht's brand of rugby is very much, there's a lot of heart and soul that goes into it, a lot of talent as well at times. So I think, like we said, whenever you get a game in Galway, it becomes a bit of a fortress, and they play a bit different to how they might play around in any other stadium.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be facetious of me to try and go too deep now into the rugby style of the Connacht play, but like, I suppose that general underdog theme around the whole thing, I mean, and that style of play, you see it every now and again. It props up, especially more so what you'll be watching, say, with football. And I know, like, when you watched, when the likes of Blackpool come to mind, when they came up under Ian Holloway years ago, and that kind of free flowing style, and I suppose everyone can kind of relate to that and get on board with that. And when you watch them, and most recently I think I was watching Connacht against Leinster, when they had that brilliant first half, and then it kind of got turned around on them. But it's captivating to watch. Like, it really, really is, and it's incredible how I suppose the relatively, the lesser of the 3 provinces in terms of, I suppose, of what they have in terms of even personnel and everything else available to them, that they can conjure up something like that. Like, it does kind of always put questions then to the most sort of bountiful different teams, and why they won't necessarily match up to that in terms of style. Like, the kind of, I suppose, it comes back to, I suppose, just what you're watching for, like, and just that the pleasure of sort of being entertained by teams, it really does appeal to people.
It really does. I remember sitting in a hammock in rural Sligo listening to Pat Lamb's exit interview, crying my eyes out that he was leaving us after all the success that he had brought. Obviously we have a few Premier League games happening tonight, Cathal.
Yeah, that's right, Kathleen. Manchester City can move 9 points clear tonight of Premier League title rivals Liverpool. Pep Guardiola's side take on Brentford. That one kicks off tonight at 8:15. The champions have won their last 9 Premier League matches in a row, but the Spaniard says he's taking nothing for granted.
After Arsenal game, we have long weeks, but now we have, 29 and first, 2 away fixtures against absolutely difficult, tough opponents. But the Premier League is like this, that is the most difficult.
That's Pep Guardiola speaking ahead of tonight's match. I guess Manchester City look in such good form, don't they? It's hard to look past them for the league title even at this early stage.
It really is. And I think the thing with Manchester City, the question that a lot of people had at the start of the season, obviously after all the Harry Kane drama, was would they have the depth to do the sort of things that they have shown us in past seasons this year? But I suppose to ask the two of you on that, do you think that even with being as high ahead as they are already, do they need to add some sort of depth into the squad in the January transfer window?
I'm not quite sure. I think they certainly have the advantage in terms of depth ahead of Liverpool. I think Liverpool's squad is too thin to sustain a title push from here. They're probably too far back now. They do have the capabilities, if they can avoid any serious injuries down the line, of playing some really quality stuff. If they can keep that consistency going from after Christmas, who knows? Chelsea have wobbled a little bit in recent weeks, but they still have a really good manager. You saw how they won the Champions League when Tuchel came in, and they have a really well resourced squad. It's just City just look too good. I think whatever about Liverpool and Chelsea and what they do, City just look too good at the moment. I think the form that they're in, they're knocking in the goals in such easy fashion as well in recent weeks. It's just been brilliant stuff from them. So it's very, very hard to look past them at this stage. And 6 points ahead now. They'll go 9 ahead of Liverpool tonight if they win. And it's really too big a gap, I think, from there.
Arthur, what about you? What do you think? Pep Guardiola says he's taking nothing for granted, and I think the last few weeks have shown that you can really take nothing for granted, especially when it comes to COVID cases, when it comes to injuries. Do Manchester City need to tighten up a bit when it comes to the January window?
Oh, it's hard to say. I think Cole's hit the nail on the head, really. I mean, they're just kind of relentless. There's nothing. And in terms of depth, you can kind of go, they might get hit. You're absolutely spot on. They could get hit and they could be missing any number of players, but they always seem to have, it seems to be such an effective kind of setup and system they have that people just sort of intermittently pop in, pop out, and it doesn't really seem to affect the whole. You kind of think they've had such a good month of it even, and you think of, it's not been with Kevin De Bruyne at any sort of peak whatsoever. It's around, and I was just happened to be checking recently enough, I think it was around this time last year specifically where they kind of kicked off that insane winning run where it's I don't know the exact number of games, it was 12, 13 or whatever, and just romped it. That was the league done. And they almost seem to be doing the same thing again, but just kicking it off a little bit earlier this time. I just think, in terms of, I suppose the big question mark is always just in Europe, and that's almost it's not something I can answer. I don't know, because you don't know why they haven't done it there yet. You would think maybe, just judging by how other teams sort of win the Champions League, and I suppose even then Chelsea kind of counteract that, but you almost nearly need some sort of pivotal figure there who will get you goals, a Lewandowski or Messi or Ronaldo or whoever. But whether they do or don't, I mean, I think that would be the only thing that's going to maybe change whether or not they do well in Europe. But I think, to be honest with you, I think the league is, I think they're just going to kick on and get stronger and stronger.
You mentioned Europe there. Considering that they do have this sort of advantage so early on in the league, do you think that will be any sort of advantage to them later on in the season when they are competing for those top European spots?
It could well be, but I guess it depends on what the gap is, obviously, when it comes to those crucial European matches and whether they can take the foot off the pedal. It's such a dangerous thing to do in sport, to take the foot off the pedal, regardless of how far you are in front. Until it's a done thing, I would be very reluctant anyway to start taking players off or resting players at the weekend so they can play midweek in the Champions League. But I don't think there's any doubt that if you were to give Manchester City a choice at the start of the season, would they rather win the Champions League or the Premier League? I think at this stage they'd like to get their hands on that European trophy. Could they do both? They could well do, given the form that they're in.
And one of the things that has kind of plagued City a little bit in the last few weeks, besides the fact, and it's kind of been off the pitch stuff, and that has been the, suppose, like disciplinary issues that Pep Guardiola has talked about. And I'm always quite surprised when I hear Guardiola talk about having these issues with players, considering the level he expects Manchester City to perform at. Do you think things like that could prove a distraction at any stage for City, Arthur?
I mean, who knows? Maybe, but I don't like. It just strikes me that it doesn't. They kind of have developed, and it's almost a kind of it leaves, I think, everyone else maybe outside feeling a little bit cold as well. Like they don't have really. I feel like everything just kind of progresses on, and different people drop off. Like you see Ferran Torres, even I think that there was that move confirmed for him to Barcelona. And you kind of think, geez, he looked good. He's already gone. And it's that kind of thing of just this remorseless kind of thing just carries on. And different people might drop out for whatever reason, disciplinary or whatever else. And it just keeps on going. And they just seem to find someone else to replace someone else. And it's all very, I don't want to say mechanical, that's unfair. But I find, and I don't know what you think about this, but I certainly find that the seasons where City have tended to win the league at this kind of canter almost, just kind of utterly forgettable. Like it really leaves me just, it's kind of emotionless stuff.
It's funny that you say that, because I actually remember last Christmas at the ESPN Christmas party, we were trying to name every Premier League winner since the creation of the league, and the years where City had won it at a canter were the years that everyone messed up and thought it was someone else, just because they were so unforgettable, and trying to remember what had actually happened in that year and what was different to one other year. Everyone struggled with it, and I think you're talking at like looking at sports journalists, and if they can't remember it, how's the average fan going to remember those sort of years?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think, even if you go back to the, wasn't it 13-14 that City won the league, but I guess the real story that time obviously was Liverpool not winning the league, and I think a lot of people had bought into the the emotional aspect of that Liverpool campaign and the football that they were playing and the wins that they had. You remember that win over City at Anfield, and it was just a really emotional atmosphere and occasion that really underlined that season. I guess it was a defining moment of that season. Obviously there was a more defining moment in Steven Gerrard down the line against Chelsea, but I think Arthur makes a good point there that it's almost emotionless. It's just ruthless stuff from Manchester City, and when they get ahead of you, it just feels hopeless nearly at this stage for the other sides in the league.
Yeah, it does a bit. And speaking of the other sides in the league, and one of the teams that are trying to catch up with Manchester City,
yeah, that's Chelsea tonight. They can move up to second if they beat Brighton. Kick off for their game at Stamford Bridge is at 7:30. In team news from that one, Brighton have named both Shane Duffy and Evan Ferguson on the bench for that from the Republic of Ireland. Of course, Ferguson just 17 years of age, but they're on the bench this evening for the visitors to Stamford Bridge, and that one gets underway very shortly at 7:30. Elsewhere in football today, Norwich have reported allegations of racism to police. That's after last night's Premier League loss to Crystal Palace. Republic of Ireland international Adam Ida was among those targeted with racist messages online. The Canaries also say that a Palace player received racist abuse from a fan during their match at Selhurst Park, which the hosts won at 3-0. Police investigating have arrested a 57-year-old man this afternoon, and Norwich added that they'll impose the strongest possible sanctions on anyone found guilty. Elsewhere in the Premier League today, Mikel Arteta is set to miss Arsenal's clash with Manchester City on New Year's Day. He's tested positive for COVID-19 and is currently isolating, while a return of a familiar face to Chelsea. John Terry is back at the club as a coaching consultant with their academy. He of course made over 700 appearances for the club, winning a total of 17 trophies. He most recently worked as an assistant to Dean Smith at Aston Villa. And here at home in football news today, Treaty United have appointed Donna Reardon as their new senior women's team manager. The Dubliner is a former manager of the Galway United and Sligo Rovers men's senior teams, while he also made over 150 appearances as a player with Preston North End, and he takes over the Limerick-based club after their campaign in the Women's National League last season.
Yeah, very well needed change for Treaty United, I think, after last season. Obviously, no team likes to come in last place, but I actually want to use that opportunity of mention of the Women's National League to talk to you about a bit of news closer to home. Obviously it was announced a while ago, but open sessions for Sligo Rovers' new team were being held recently, and I suppose I just wanted to ask a bit about what you think about the idea of Sligo getting a women's team, because I know, I remember I grew up in rural Sligo, it was very much a GAA parish. We didn't really play all that much soccer, but went to school in town, and obviously the success that Sligo Rovers experienced was massive. Like, I remember the lads coming in, girls screaming, all girls school, so we didn't have too many lads appearing around the place, but it was massive. And I just think of, in some ways it was a missed opportunity, because plenty in the school did play football and would have loved the opportunity to line up with, like, alongside Sligo Rovers and commit themselves to it. So what do you think this will do for soccer in the county?
I think it'll be huge. Like you, Kathleen, from the same area, West Sligo, broadly speaking. West Sligo, we're from a GA stronghold, I think it's fair to say. But the fact that Sligo
stronghold
Rovers,
on the wins, wouldn't we?
the fact that Sligo Rovers, I think it's a natural progression to have a senior women's team. They've had a really strong underage academy at both men's and women's level in recent years, and I guess the club is of a stature that it should have a women's team in the National League competing. The facilities obviously at the showgrounds now are second to none. Football is such a big thing and it's such a big part of life, not just in Sligo but I think in the Northwest. And if you look across the Women's National League, there are quite a few players from that general area. If you think of Mayo, Sligo, Donegal, Leitrim, Roscommon, down to Galway, a lot of players that are actually playing in the league with other teams, and you'd hope that Sligo Rovers can harness that now and have a really strong force in the northwest of the country that can compete in the Women's National League. Also hugely positive that the games will be at the showgrounds, and you'd hope that the crowds, you know, Sligo's a great football town, a great football area and sporting area indeed, and I'm sure Sligo people always get behind their sports people, whether it's Gaelic games, whether it's soccer, whether it's athletics, whether it's Mona McSharry in the swimming, or whatever might be happening. And I've no doubt that they'll get behind the bit of red when they're into the Women's National League. And it's great for the league as well to have a presence in that part of the country. Yeah,
definitely. I'm really looking forward to it and looking forward to getting to some of the games. And like you said, I think it is an interesting point that maybe hasn't been discussed all that much, is the fact that a lot of the players from Sligo and from around that area of the northwest do tend to have to travel to play their games, and how it's going to affect other teams in the league. So are other teams going to see us in like a few of their players leaving and joining the Sligo Rovers team because of the sort of facilities? And I think one of the really important things for this Rovers team, considering the time they're setting up, is the fact that they do everything properly, that they have like proper kits sorted out, proper sponsorship sorted. Obviously the matches be given as much exposure as they can, I think will be really important. Arthur, will you be attending some of these matches in the coming season?
Oh, any chance at all, to be honest. I know where you're saying you're coming from. Like, I'm a little bit closer to town, obviously just outside town, and I mean, anyone who knows Sligo, like, football's just, it's enormous. Like, it's so big, and it's just funny you talk about it there, I suppose. And people getting different chances and the opportunities and pathways. And Cathal, you mentioned Stephen Kearns, who went to Connacht, and from the rugby point of view. And I remember growing up, his sister Brona was a few years, I think, below me, or a year or two below me anyway, but like, fantastic footballer, incredible footballer. Everyone knew it kind of in that general area. And you kind of think all this time on, I suppose, like, when you have this kind of pathway and it's right there, right in Sligo town, like, and think of how many people are going to be of similar talent and ability, you have a chance to pursue that. It's just fantastic. It's so good. And I definitely think, I think there's no question that, again, it's kind of, I have full faith in the kind of people in charge of Sligo Rovers at the minute, that it will be well run and it will be done to the utmost standards. And when that's in place, then I think genuinely, hopefully, people just kind of fall into it and just follow and just go with it, and kind of that, any sort of difference or separation is eroded.
Yeah, definitely. There's a real growl for it around the place. I know even the minute the news was announced, I've been already annoying the Sligo Rovers account on Twitter, tweeting them every 5 minutes, excited for actually getting to my first match. We have Rachel Blackmore coming up on the show later, but there was other racing on today. Yeah, big day at Leopardstown, the final day, Kathleen, of the Christmas Festival. Sharjah has matched Istabrac and Hurricane Fly by becoming a 4-time winner of the Matheson Hurdle at Leopardstown. The Willie Mullins trained 8-year-old prevailed for the 4th year in succession, holding off the challenge of Zanahir. The novice chase went the way of Fury Road for Jack Kennedy and Gordon Elliott, and also today Rachel Blackmore was aboard the Henry de Bromhead train Journey with Me to take the honours in the maiden hurdle. And as you say, we'll hear from Rachel later on tonight's programme. In Limerick today, the Grade 2 Sporting Limerick Hurdle went the way of Tiabu and jockey Jordan Gate for the Gordon Elliott trained 4-year-old, just edged out Quilixios in second. In darts news today, we mentioned this at the top of the show, but the reigning champion Gerwyn Price has raised the possibility of the World Darts Championship being postponed. The
The tournament continues at the Alexandra Palace but has been marred by the withdrawal of 3 players after they tested positive for COVID-19. Vincent van der Voort and 3-time winner Michael van Gerwen both had to withdraw after testing positive, and earlier today Dave Chisnell was forced to pull out after he returned a positive test, and that means that Luke Humphries receives a bye into the last 16. Price said on social media that he wouldn't disagree with the tournament being halted at this point. Sky Sports analyst Mark Webster says the withdrawals have had a major impact on the tournament.
First and foremost, hope Dave gets better, but it's just a shame for the event. We lost whatever players we've lost, but we've lost the semi-finalists from last year. Dave Chisnell would have been coming here thinking, this is my time, and unfortunately he's not going to get that chance. And by default, really, we've got an interesting tie with Chris Dobie and Luke Humphries. Not the way they wanted it, but look, I said it last night, I hope this is the last one, because it doesn't help the event. It's not great for the crowd watching, and we don't want to keep losing players, and hopefully that is the last of it now, and just hopefully Dave gets better.
Yeah, so that's Mark Webster on the current situation at the Alexandra Palace. By the way, Gerwin Price is in action tonight. He plays Dirk van Dijvenbode in the last 16 this evening, and one game already underway. Gary Anderson and Ian White are level at 2 legs apiece. That's in the first set of their encounter this evening, and Johnny Clayton plays Michael Smith in the last game of the night at the Alexandra Palace. In some other sporting news today, in tennis, Novak Djokovic's participation at the Australian Open has been put into further doubt following confirmation that he's withdrawn from the ATP Cup in Sydney. The world tennis number 1, who's spoken of his opposition to vaccines, is yet to confirm if he's had a COVID-19 jab. All players at next month's major in Australia have to be vaccinated unless they're medically exempt. And finally, Kathleen, in some NFL news today, the NFL says no one loved American football more than the legend John Madden, who's passed away at the age of 85. The coach turned commentator is perhaps best known in the UK for being the face of Madden, one of the most successful sports video games ever, and of course lots of players of that game here in Ireland as well. He holds the best winning percentage for NFL coaches who've taken charge of at least 100 games, and he's passed away at the age of 85.
Cathal, thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Lots of interesting news, and it was always great to have a bit of Sligo chat on. I definitely don't get enough of it when I'm over in London. Arthur, thank you so much for joining us as well. Coming up after the break, we will have Fiona Hayes on to talk about the cancellations in the Irish Provincial Games, and also a bit of a preview about Connacht versus Munster.
The Newsround on Off the Ball.
With Gillette. Put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
First Fortnight's annual Mental Health, Art and Culture Festival is open from this January 2nd. We're open with more than 50 events in our hybrid festival for you to enjoy. A feast of dance, poetry, music, discussion, visual art, interviews, film and so much more. Online and live in venues around the country. Join the conversation this January. For tickets